Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miguel Barrero. I'm the new education manager of the Santillana Foundation. I would like to thank you for attending, and I would also like to thank the OCDE, both Marta and our main guest, Andreas Schleicher, for coming here to present this book with us in Madrid. And I would also like to thank both Jesus and Bernard for their participation in order to try to make this event as agile and dynamic as possible. I'm going to deliver just a brief introduction. I would like to discuss with you that for our foundation, the book that we are presenting today is a source of pride and honor. It is not just another book. We are going through times in which the production and writing of essays on education in the form of blogs and publications and everything is huge, and we think that this book is a book that has a special value and a very significant value for the times we are going through. The point of view of this foundation and the reason why we decided to tackle the translation and the publication in Spanish, and we will do shortly in Portuguese, was due to three main reasons. First was credibility. In this case, it is a book that the greatest world traveler of the world of education and the history of education, which is Andreas, uses all his experience and all his expertise after meeting ministers, authorities, experts, college teachers and professors, and it is a huge amount of credibility he accumulates. I guess one of the greatest amount of experience and of knowledge about the topic, and that's a lot to say. Apart from that, one of the things that have called our attention in the book, apart from credibility, is the tone of voice. He is very much related to PISA, to Pisa, and Pisa has made quite an important contribution in the education debate, because Pisa is associated normally to statistics, to figures, and to the interpretation of those. But the exercise that he goes through is a much more literary approach, an exercise of interpretation, and that's what he does in this book. It is a narrative of his experiences and of his recommendations. It is an essay, but it is much closer to a narrative than to the statistic interpretation. There is a second element that we also value a lot, is the opportunity, how appropriate his reflection is on the topic. We are in a time of profound anxiety, educational anxiety. There is a feeling in the whole education community of a feeling that we need to look for a new paradigm that provides an answer to this society of the 21st century, assuming that we are working with systems that are giving signs of exhaustion because of the digitalization and globalization. We have a different society, and this system is becoming obsolete to some extent. So what Andreas does is to contribute to that reflection and to that train of thought, and he structures the book very well, and in the end we have a chapter at the end, and I'm not detracting from the value of the rest of the book. He asks, what do we do? And he proposes a set of axles on which we can start to build that 21st century system, and in proposing those axles, and his thesis is that transformation of a school is an inevitable task that we all have to tackle as soon as possible. And so we value greatly how appropriate this reflection is. And he makes a call to everyone to the inevitable need to transform education systems. And he makes that call from the conviction that the main asset for the prosperity of a country, or at least one of the main assets, has always been and will always be education, which gains even more weight and more value in this society of uncertainty, where we will be needing competences, as abilities, skills, and knowledge that all schools will have to incorporate in their methodology, in their day-to-day, and in their curricula. And last but not least, the third element, apart from credibility and that appropriateness, is his attitude. He takes advantage of his huge experience to convey a message to all of us, which is, it is possible to change things. And he tells us, and he gives us examples of where, with collaborative policies, where we have participating professors, families, and legislators, we have been able to produce changes. And in order to achieve that change, we have lessons and experiences that can serve as an inspiration. So that mixture of appropriateness, credibility, and possibilistic, propositive message is what we consider is extremely important to start building the school of the future. For those of us who are willing to change the system, this is an inevitable reading. It is not just another book. Lastly, I would like to say that for Santillana Foundation, this book is like the first stone of a definition of our strategy. We will be developing a system or a strategy in the future where we will become a platform of collaboration, where we will be able to generate information and generate discussion and conversation around the 21st century schools, and where we will take as an axis the profile or the definition of the abilities and competences that a 21st century citizen should possess. And we are convinced that if we start that reflection, we will end up having a new curricula, a new management, a new profile for our teachers, and so on and so forth. That will be more or less the program that we will embark upon. And so this is an excellent opportunity, and the book will serve as an excellent basis as well. And the only thing that we want is that the proposal that we are making from the foundation about our reflection, we are convinced that we have to bring forward the experiences to Latin America, and we would also like the contribution of international experts, and we would like Latin America to have their own voice and to participate proactively in that debate about the 21st century school. Thank you very much for being here, and I turn the floor over to our protagonists. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias a la Fundación Santillana y a Telefónica.
I would like to thank the Santillana Foundation and also Telefónica for giving me the opportunity to present this book. I think it's a fascinating book. I normally read novels more than anything. Of course, I read a lot, but I have never read anything as exhaustive and as thorough about education as this book. From the first page is just like the best novel in the world, because it is entertaining, it seduces you, and it talks about the myths that we have to break with around education. We won't have time to deal with everything, but that's what the book is here for you to read and to really think about it. It should be on the table in any debate about education. When I was coming here, I spoke to a friend that is a former Minister of Education. He's from the Socialist Party. You will probably know him. And I said, I am going to present this book. He knows him, of course, from Pisa reports. And what's your opinion, I asked. And he said, they are necessary, the Pisa reports, and they are very nice. But the problem is how we read them. They are read like Eurovision results. Have we read them as if they were the result of the Eurovision contest? How should we read these reports?
I read the PISA results is really by showing us what's possible. You know, often we are very much locked into our vision in the country, in the school, in the classroom, and what PISA allows us is to see the world. It sees what other education systems achieve, what other teachers achieve. For example, what struck me is that the 10% most disadvantaged children in Shanghai achieve as well as the 10% wealthiest American children. You know, we often think poverty is destiny. There's nothing we can do about it. Suddenly we see it's possible. Or we see innovative teaching in a way that we often don't see it in our neighborhood. And I think it's opened our eyes. It helps us seeing really what's possible in education. It's not about copying and pasting from other systems. That's never possible. But we can see what drives success in different circumstances and learn from that. I learned a lot from traveling the world.
¿Usted creó esto?
I believe that you promoted those PISA reports. You are, you created them. You studied physics, but you ended up here. Why did you come up with this idea of creating the PISA report? How someone that studies physics ends up creating this type of report?
Well, maybe my physics experience actually helped me. You know, when I entered the field of education, I found a field that was dominated by ideas, by beliefs, by sometimes myths, but it lacked a kind of comparative perspective. There was a lot of controversy and a lot of voices in education, but there was no narrative. And I was trying to sort of create a common language among countries, and I thought the best way to create a common language is by looking at the results that are being achieved. Because everybody has an idea of what we should be doing, how we should be teaching, how we should be learning. There are lots of pedagogical ideas, but the best way to start is actually to see how well are students prepared for life, and to look at those kinds of outcomes. And that's the origin of the PISA assessment. You know, I entered the OECD in Paris, and my first meeting with education ministers was, 25 ministers sitting around a table, and everybody saying, we've got the best education system in the world. And if we have a little problem left, last time I did a big reform that will solve that problem. There was no dialogue, no discussion among countries. And actually, if ministers of education meet these days, they look at those kinds of the results and say, how did you in Finland, make teaching so attractive? Or how did you in Canada help immigrant students succeed so well? Or how in China did you make students believe that the effort is the source of success, not, talent? So I think it's achieved that goal in creating a conversation. It doesn't provide, PISA never tells you what you should be doing, but it tells you what everybody else is doing and with what success, and that has created, I think, a conversation.
¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes. Le doy las gracias.
Hi, good afternoon. I thank you very much for being here with us, and I would also like to thank the people attending because they have come to listen to what an expert has to say about education. In Spain, when we talk about these reports, these PISA reports, it normally generates controversy in the news, in the day-to-day. It generates it is just controversial, but it is also true that education is not one of those topics, one of those subjects that are always in the first headlines of our news. And we normally deal with other types of controversies. In Spain, I believe we lack two things in terms of education. There is no political agreement, there is no political consensus for a lasting educational policy, and there hasn't been for a long time. And on the other hand, I believe that there is a lot of criticism of about the challenges of the future without giving really any solutions. Or when we get the Pisa results, we do not make proposals about how to improve things. And so I don't think we are addressing the technological challenge. I don't know if you agree with me. In our day-to-day, mobile phones, tablets, portable computers or laptops are revolutionizing society, our habits as a society. And to what extent today's education can have little to do with the education we will need in a few years due to technological changes. Could we reach a point where education is fully digital or technological as opposed to what we have right now? Because we have models that have a different language, an analog language.
It's really important. Artificial intelligence, technology should push us to think much harder about what makes us really human, so that we educate our children not to become second-class robots but first-class humans. And what are those kinds of qualities that complement the artificial intelligence of computers? And to think much harder about what students should learn. What we know is that the kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, are also easy to digitize, to automate. The world no longer rewards you just for what you know. Now, Google knows everything. The world rewards you for what you can do with what you know. And the rise in social and emotional skills today, character qualities. Education is no longer about teaching people something, but helping them develop a reliable compass, that they can find their own way in this world. And that requires a very, very different caliber of teaching, a very different kind of, where, you mentioned at the beginning, a highly politicized environment. Well, that is sort of comes out a very industrial view on education, that the government will somehow figure out what children should be learning, writing a curriculum. Then we train a lot of teachers to put that curriculum into the classroom, and then students learn this. It's a very kind of consumption-oriented model of education, not an agency model of education where students are there to develop, this capacity to think creatively, to solve problems collaboratively, where teachers are facilitators, designers, coaches, mentors. I think we really need to, and when you have a system where there is true ownership of professional practice by the teachers, by the school leaders, you worry much less about politics. Politics will be just, providing the framework for this. The stronger the profession, the less you worry about, partisan politics in education.
Yo quisiera seguir.
I would like to focus again on the Spanish case, as Jesus has done, because Spain, that really is a country that has reached very high levels of democracy in the European context, in terms of growth, income growth, and so on, with nuances. But we haven't been able to create an education system with a quality that could be demanded from such a country. I have some anxieties about this topic. For example, one of the last reports of the OCDE said that in Spain education was failing as a social lift. Why is education failing to help people climb the ladder, the social ladder, in order to improve your social class? Why?
I think it's not just Spain. I think this is a legacy for almost all of Europe, where often education is very much framed by the social context, family background, but also teacher beliefs. In Europe, often teachers have lower expectations for children from more disadvantaged backgrounds. We make it easier for them. We put them in a low-performing track. We send them to vocational school. So we have many devices in Europe to sort of think that students have different abilities. And when I compare that, for example, with Northern Europe or with particularly the Asian countries, they believe that every student can learn, and it's your work as a teacher to redouble your effort to find. They leave their teachers much more time for other things than teaching. If you're a teacher in Spain, you teach one lesson after the other for a small class, so it's not so difficult, but you teach one lesson after the other. If you're a teacher in Shanghai in China, you spend less than half of the time teaching in the Spanish teacher, but you have so much more time to work with individual students, to find out who they are as learners, what you can do to support them. You work with the parents, you work with other teachers. You create an environment in which every student can grow, and that is the social lift. That is capitalizing on the talent, that believes that ordinary students have really extraordinary talents. And in Europe, we have very much developed a kind of philosophy of sorting people, where we believe, some people are talented, and that's actually arrived in the mindset of students. We ask students in one of our Pisa assessments once, what do you think makes you successful in mathematics? And you had students, the majority of students in Spain tell you, oh, that's clear, it's about talent. If I'm not born as a genius, I will study something else. If you ask that same question to a student in Japan or Singapore, China or Finland, you have 9 out of 10 who tell you, if I study really, really hard, I trust my teacher is going to help me and I'm going to be successful. They own their success. And that is where social mobility comes from. And we have, I think, in Europe created, for example, you take Spain. If you have a student with poor results, you say, okay, you do the same thing once more, you repeat the class with another teacher. I have solved the problem for me as a teacher. I've just pushed the problem to someone else. And the student is there, is very expensive, is very ineffective. And I think those devices, tracking, great repetition, they are the symbol of sorting in education, and that's what's hindering social mobility ultimately. This being said, I wouldn't put Spain if you look at this in the big picture, think about the progress Spain has achieved in the last 30, 40 years in education, in giving more people better skills to collaborate in today's world. I think actually, overall, I think it's not so bad in progress, but if you think about the last 10, 15 years, that's really where we have seen very little change in Spain and in Europe.
Él sostiene.
He states, or he sustains in the book, he breaks up some myths, and that is a very important chapter for our own discussion. He says that the family background is not so important, the size of the classroom is not so important, the money that is spent is not so important either. That was very shocking for me, but he emphasizes the professors, the teachers. He says that we have to empower the teachers, and we are failing there in Spain, aren't we? What should we do?
I think in Spain you have made teaching, reasonably financially attractive. Teachers get, I know I'm going to be criticized for saying this, but I think actually teachers get quite decent salaries here. But I don't think Spain has made teaching intellectually attractive. Teachers don't have an open career. They are not, don't have mentors, classroom, observing somebody else's classroom, working with other teachers to research new practices, to be the engineer of the future success of the system, to engage in curriculum design, in the design of pedagogies. That's what we see in high-performing education systems. You teach in your classroom, but you have also many other responsibilities. You work with families, you work as a social worker, as a psychologist. You have so many different roles to play, to think about how can I help diverse students succeed. And I think that is what makes teaching really attractive. Finland, teachers in relative terms don't get better pay than teachers in Spain. But you have 9 applicants for every teaching job. Everybody wants to become a teacher. They attract the most talented people into the teaching profession. They develop every teacher to become successful. You learn in university to become a teacher, but more importantly, you learn with other teachers. You learn in the best schools to adopt some of the best practices. And it's an amazing job. Everybody wants to do this. That, I think, is a challenge. And the kind of industrial environment that we have created for teaching, every student is taught in the same way, every teacher is, the work is organized in the same way. That is what we had, in a factory environment, not in a kind of professional environment. If you would be working in medicine, in the health sector, research in medicine is not done by universities. It's largely done by medical doctors who do clinical trials. They are at the frontier of their research. And in education, the teaching profession, we think, we educate the teachers and then we let them alone in the classroom in isolation. And that is something that is very difficult, I think.
Parece fácil la fórmula.
It seems very easy to change things, and let's hope that someone listens to you. About the Spanish case, I heard you say or read from you that the problem was that we have devoted too much time and energy to create new laws. Each government has tried to create new laws, and little time has been devoted to the core, the essence of this question. Is it a Spanish problem, the amount of laws that have tried?
I think a law can be the beginning for change in education, but it should never be the end of change. In a way, a law can set a framework. It's actually very easy to push some things into a school. What is more important is to get the good ideas out of the classroom and into the system. You know, even the best minister of education cannot address the needs of millions of students, of hundreds of thousands of teachers. But if we can mobilize the best ideas of the students, of the teachers, to create the world's best education system, that's the kind of framework in which we work, where the government should ask itself every day, you know, how can I support teachers best? How can I support the schools best? What can I do to engage families in the education systems? And this is not a question of laws and regulation. You know, this is a question of empowerment, providing the space and the opportunities for people to grow in their profession, to develop. That's what we see in the most advanced education systems. And I don't think it's very difficult to do. Actually, if you look to a success story like Finland, in the 1970s they had a very similar approach to education. You know, top-down, very regulated, very hierarchical, highly stratified, and they turned that on its head. You know, for you were a school inspector, from the next day they ask you, well, you know, tomorrow you have a job if the schools need your help, you know. If you were a school principal, they ask you to spend 2/3 of your time in your school to help the school succeed, but 1/3 of your time you are an administrator. You are the education system. You contribute to the development of the community. So I think there's a lot of room and space that we need to create for educators.
Me gustaría profundizar en un principio, una teoría.
I would like to delve deeper into one of your concepts, which is the question of education through collaboration, through teamwork and team building. Two questions about that. One, drilling deeper into what you said, that perhaps in Spain we could get rid of some subjects and delve deeper into some others. We say in Spain that if you try to embrace too much, you end up taking nothing. So you think that we should perhaps concentrate on a few subjects. And then there is a debate in Spain. There are even associations that defend this, that advocate this, which is homework. There are people who are in favor of getting rid of homework. I don't know if you are in favor of getting rid of subjects and getting rid of homework. What do you think?
The homework question, I do believe it's very important to give students opportunities to take responsibility for their learning, to take ownership, to set their own goals, to learn, to monitor progress. And I think homework is one of those opportunities if we design it well. Homework can complement the experience of learning in school if it's designed well. If it's designed poorly, the teacher says, I didn't finish my lesson, finish it at home and ask your parents to help you. You know, that's the kind of homework that is counterproductive. But I think the idea of homework, of motivating, self-regulated learning, taking responsibility, effort, persistence, all those qualities that are important, I think well-designed homework can achieve that, in my view. About the curriculum and the instructional system, I think what has happened not just in Spain but in many countries, that over time we have added many, many things to the curriculum. It's very easy to put in something new into the curriculum. It's very hard to take something away from the curriculum, because then, you know, parents will complain, oh, my child no longer learns what was so important for me, and so on. So education is a very conservative social system. Why do you teach so much trigonometry and calculus in Spanish schools, in mathematics? This is not the core of mathematics. Mathematicians will tell you, no, this is not essential to learn mathematics. Is it essential in the world of calculus? Well, you know, computers are doing this 1 million times faster than human. The reason why we teach this cannot be found in today's world, cannot be found in the nature of mathematics. It's because we use those skills 400 years ago when we measured the size of the fields, and that has become mathematics, and we've added new things, and that has crowded out the space. It made our curricula a mile wide and an inch deep. No? And I think to revert this takes a lot of courage, to teach fewer things at greater depth, to focus on conceptual understandings. Do people understand the architecture of a discipline? Can you think like a mathematician? Can you think like an historian? History is not, about names and places. History is about understanding how the narrative of a society has evolved and developed and how it has unraveled under different circumstances. Can you think like a scientist? Can you design an experiment? Understand what is scientifically investigable? And teaching fewer things at greater depths is much more demanding on teachers. It's very easy to walk through 1,000 pages of a textbook. It's much harder to actually design a lesson that strengthens and deepens the thinking of students. But that's really what good instruction is about and what we should expect from modern teaching these days. No? Rigor, cognitive demand, having high expectations for every student, focus, teaching few things at great depths. And the last element is coherence. Today we understand quite well how students learn, but we don't build that into our instructional systems. Again, what we know from brain research is that the only way you will never learn a second language is by teaching you in secondary school one lesson on Monday and another on Thursday. The brain doesn't learn in this way. Why do we do this in school? It's very convenient to do. That's the way we organize schooling. I think that's...
Muy bien, antes de pasar a ver...
Okay, very good. So before seeing the audiovisual material, before Jesus moderates a discussion, I would like to ask a last question. You've visited many countries. You've studied many training and education systems, and you want innovation to happen. I would like you to tell us what has surprised you in terms of innovation example in your travels around the world. Where have you found the most interesting innovation to explain it here in Madrid?
In very innovative schools in Spain, amazing places, with very different pedagogies. I think almost every country can surprise you, can amaze you in terms of the educational experience, the kind of teachers you meet. These are amazing people. I think what interests me most is how you make this success systemic. How do you get those great ideas, those innovative practice to become part of the education systems? And there, I've seen very few places that systematically encourage innovation.
Algunos ejemplos.
Yeah, one example, again, I bring you to China because I really believe they are very good in building kind of innovation in the system. If you are a teacher in China or in some of the provinces and you have a great idea, the government gives you a grant to do an experiment. And you can try it out in your school. There's a lot of room for this. If at the end of the school year you think you are successful, the government will tell, show us that it can work in 10 other schools with other people in other places. If you're successful, one day you can become an experimental school. If you're an experimental school, every parent wants to enroll their children there. I think those are examples where success travels. The good practices get out of the classroom, get into the education system. People share their ideas, collaborative practice. Ontario in Canada is a province particularly with diversity. 40% of the students in Canada, in Ontario, have a migration background. It's a really challenging environment to work with. We cannot see in the Pisa results whether you're a migrant student or a student without an immigrant background, because the system has been really good in building innovation into the system to help different students succeed really well. And that's sort of the harder challenge. Not every education system has great innovative practices, but to build a system that encourages innovation. Once I asked teachers in a teacher survey, do you think that if you're more innovative in your teaching, the system will recognize you, reward you for being more innovative? 23% of the teachers in the OECD area feel the education system supports innovation. Most teachers feel that the education system is really a hostile environment to new practice, to different practice, and if we cannot change their perception, we will not change anything in education. I think that's the challenge.
Bueno, pues si les parece, vamos a pasar a ver...
Okay, so if you want, let's move on to see some of the conclusions, some of the assessments of this book that will encourage us to reflect. And if you want to, you can ask questions. So if we are brief and precise, we'll have the answers. So just to be a little bit agile, okay? So... here we have an interesting comparison between. Can you see it properly? Maybe you can stand here. Okay. In terms of the school of the past, the 21st century school, a school that has to do with subjects, another one that is more focused on projects and experiences. A school that has a hierarchy, another one that is more collaborative. In the past, it was more standardization. In the 21st century, more differentiation and personalization. The past one with a technology to give support. In the 21st century, technology to make us more free. In the past, we had to provide education. In the 21st century, we have to focus on results. In the past, we had to highlight the school management. In the 21st century, you have to focus on the education leadership. In the past, the quality control, and now the quality guarantee. And how important degrees are. We could speak a lot about the things that are going on, because this need of having different titles and different degrees. So the quality school, the education centers of tomorrow, according to this book, help people participate with the rest of the people. I mean, we were speaking about how important it is to work in a team and how important it is to get involved, to have a good consciousness of what's good and what's not good, contrast between thinking by ourselves, to be independent, to have our own personality, intellectual personality, to be responsible for the collective well-being, to interact in a respectful way and in a satisfactory way. It has something to do with the values that we acquire in education, to understand a change that is faster than ever. I think that we are seeing this, how dramatic these changes are taking place, not only in the technological world. We didn't know cell phones, for example, but this is even obsolete. We are speaking about social media, we are speaking about the television consumption through disruptive channels, and it is moving so fast, facing social challenges that are linked to this technological change, to learn some jobs that have not been created. This is happening, and this will happen. To use technology that haven't been invented yet, and to acquire reaction capability in order to progress, to have this knowledge, to have this capability of being able to react of what's going to come. Because I think that we all agree on the fact that there are many things that we don't know that are going to happen, because everything is changing dramatically and very fast. Is there any question about what we have just seen? Yes. You can stand up if you want. You have a mic, okay? Okay, if you want to sit down, you can do it. Are you okay? At your wish. Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Nilda. I come from Argentina. I'm a teacher, and I work in the area of innovation and education, and especially in what has to do with the introduction of technology. And the question is because something that Jesus has said before. During last years, the inclusion of technology in schools has accelerated a lot. There's some kind of race for having more technology, but the education practices are the same. We have a digital blackboard instead of having a traditional blackboard, or with a computer instead of a book. But this has not generated a shift, a change in education. So what are we doing wrong when trying to include technology in this education system?
Raise a really good point. You know, in a way we have 21st century technology, we have 20th century pedagogy and teaching, and a 19th century work organization. And that is really a toxic mix, because again, actually when you look at the Pisa results, technology actually makes things worse often. Technology intensity is often negatively related to outcomes. If students sit in the classroom and copy and paste things from Google, you get worse outcomes than with very traditional teaching. So I think the question is how we can develop 21st century pedagogy, innovative learning environments where, you know, teachers are connected through technology. Why should you just stand in front of a teacher that happens to be there rather than to be being taught by the teacher who is really adapted to your personal learning style? Now, why can't teachers be connected through technology, learn from each other, with each other, share their plans, ideas? Collaborative consumption is the word of our days. We have this in every area of our, but in education, sort of this co-creation among teachers, using a common language, a common platform. Pedagogies, now you think about collaborative learning, social learning. Technology is the big enabler to this. You can design experiments, you can actually go into a virtual laboratory. Those things are possible, but I think we need to create the space for the profession to engage with this. Technology can amplify great teaching, but it doesn't replace poor teaching or traditional teaching. And that's, I think, the mistake that we make, that we basically put technology on top of the system rather than giving teachers more space to become really the designer as the experts. We think, the experts are all outside the school system, and we put the technology into the classroom and the ideas in the classroom and the curriculum in the classroom. No, the experts are in the classroom now. The people that we train to be experts are the teachers. If we can empower them to use and to design innovative pedagogies for the technologies of our times, I think we can be very successful. Again, there are great examples of schools that do that really well. So I think it's possible.
¿Alguna valoración más que está contenida en este?
Some assessments that are included in this book, and that we'll see with another slide. If the machine works, of course. Let's see. Well, maybe we've run out of batteries. Okay, yes.
A ver, falsos mitos que impiden la...
False myths that prevent education from improving. Well, there's some controversy here. Bernard was mentioning this. Okay, so false myths. The unfavored students will always have bad results. Always. A fake or false myth. The immigrants lower the global performance of the education systems. False myth. Success in education is just about spending money. Small classrooms always mean better results. More learning time generates better results. Another false myth. The success in education has to do with the inherited talent. Some countries have better results because of their culture. Another false myth, as Andreas says, only the best graduates should be teachers. Another one, to choose the students because of their attitudes is a way of rising standards. 9 false myths that prevent education from improving. That's what the author says. Questions? Please be brief, okay? Hello, I'm Lola Delgado. I have 2 children. They are going to school, of course, and I'm a journalist too. So, speaking about the false myth of more learning time generates better results, I would like to ask a question in Spain. Normally, both politicians and families will always ask for longer school days. But it seems that the results of the different Pisa reports prove and show that the shorter these school days are, the better the results are. So why does this happen?
Actually, if in Spain you add 1 hour more mathematics education, you get better math results. If you add 1 hour more science, you get better science results. That is true. Within a country, if you keep everything else stable, adding more time will get you better results. If you look at this across countries, you see that the relationship between the learning time and learning outcomes is actually negative. The United Arab Emirates has about 60 hours of learning per week, in school or out of school, with private tutoring, lots of things that happen for students. Finland has about half of that time, 35 hours per week learning time. But you look at the learning time the learning gains per hour of instruction, you can find in Finland students learn a lot in very little time, and in the United Arab Emirates students learn very little in a lot of time. What is the difference? The learning outcomes are always the product of the quantity, the time, and the quality of the instructional environment. And we can do so much more by improving the instructional environment to raise outcomes and by adding more time. The only precious resource in education is actually student learning time. It's not money. Money we can always find. But student learning time is limited, and we want also to take care of the well-being of students. We don't want that they spend all of their life in a school environment. And so by improving the quality of the instructional environment, we achieve so much more than just by adding more time. Spain is a good example. You know, you have longer school days than most of the OECD countries. You're on the long end of the instruction time. But again, you know, focusing on creating a more productive learning environment, to give teachers more space to design innovative learning practices and so on, is going to be a better recipe to improve learning than just adding more time to the system. No?
Más ideas que están en el libro.
More ideas in the book. So, characteristics of successful education systems. So we'll make a summary of what you can see here. They move on from ranking the human talent to develop it. The key thing is to develop capabilities, a solid leadership in school, and a continuous communication with parents. They guarantee consistent, continuous, and systematic politics. The education reforms has to give time and space for thoughtful application. They train constantly the teacher. They attract the best teachers as the biggest challenge that the systems have to face. They transform the administration control in professional methods of work organization. The evaluation give teachers the possibility of catching up in terms of education. They personalize the education experience. Students have the possibility of fulfilling high standards with this personalized education. Education is a priority for them. Their citizens make decisions in this sense. I asked the author, do you think that, generally speaking, in Europe or in Spain, we consider the education reforms seriously enough as something that is a concern that could pave the way for the future of a country? There are people that say that education, it was conditions the prosperity of a country.
Educational reform has typically a long trajectory. As long as you consider educational reform as a project for an electoral term, for 4 years, there's very little you can achieve. You can change the material conditions. You don't change the habits, the practices. And if you're a teacher in the classroom and you think, what I do in the classroom depends on the next government, then the government afterwards will do something different. You will not change your behavior. So it's really, really important to design educational reform with a very long horizon. What do we want our children to learn? For jobs that have not been created, to use technologies that have not been invented, to solve social problems that we can't imagine. What is the long-run future of our country? What's the society that we want to live in? And then to design our education experience around this, and then to think about the policies and practices today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, 5 years, in 10 years. And you will say, well, that's not possible in a kind of democratic environment, but there are actually very, very good examples to this. I think Canada is a great example where there's a lot of there's a highly political environment, but people would make education decisions in a way that is very consensual. Because the government knows we cannot, actually achieve anything if we don't have broad ownership across the political spectrum in the profession. They will actually walk towards that consensus. Norway, Denmark, Finland, other good examples of this. Japan. So I think people often say, well, you can do that in Singapore, you can do that in China, but it will not work in a kind of Western democracy. No, there are many good examples where actually you can build a broad consensus across the political spectrum, but even more important, to build ownership in the profession. If you do not involve teachers in the design of reform, they're not going to help you with the implementation. That's very simple, really. No?
Preguntas sobre esto, brevedad, por favor.
So questions about this, please be brief. Very, very brief, please. Good afternoon, Andreas. Thank you very much for this excellent book. I'm Mariano Fernandez Anguita. I'm a teacher's teacher, so to speak. So I like a lot something that you say in the book. You say it for 5 times. It says the quality of an education system can't be more than the quality of its teachers. of your McKinsey, I think. Well, my question is if this highlight in terms of the teacher, because the teacher depends on the budget, it's a face-to-face relationship. We know it's very important, but if I want to know if it has a demobilizing element, because from Aristotle we know that the system is bigger than the adding up of every piece. So any company manager in a party, etc., knows that the system has to be more than the adding up of the different parts, in this case teachers. And I would like to know if we have the risk that although we have to have better teachers, and what we have, we should improve the system and we shouldn't get distracted. I mean, this was what has happened to OCDE, because Pisa is very popular, but other works from OCDE about the future schools, etc., have been forgotten by Pisa, Talis, and other surveys that are more based on individuals.
Really about the design of our education systems. I absolutely agree. We have really atomized education. The industrial work organization that dominates schooling today, that was actually perfect for the industrial age. You know, you have one curriculum for everybody. You educate students in batches of age. You to put a teacher in the classroom to replicate the same education experiences. That has atomized and isolated teachers. And the more we succeed to build a kind of a combination of professional autonomy and a collaborative culture, the more we can capitalize on the collective wisdom of the profession and advance professional ownership, that teachers own their practice, not, you know, somebody else and some textbook. And I think this is something, it's an achievable goal. We have achieved this in other professions as well. You know, the medical profession. And you mentioned, you know, research and innovation. In the health sector, we spent 17 times as much on innovation than in the field of education. It's not twice as much, it's not 3 times as much, it's 17 times as much. Because we understand the importance of giving people the space to develop new ideas and change our practice, to question the established wisdom of our times. In education, whether for students or teachers, we are very good at transmitting our knowledge to the next generation of teachers or students. And all very good in helping people question the established wisdom of our times, to think around the next corner, to connect the dot where the next innovation is going to come. And that is something that has to do with the work organization in schools. You know, some people say, oh, you cannot do that in schooling because, you know, this is a very kind of traditional environment. Or some people say because teacher unions, you know, own the kind of teaching profession. The more industrial your school system becomes, the more powerful you get a union talking about industrial interests. The more professional your work environment becomes, the more professional will the unions be, because they take care of the professional interests of their workers. And I think that's really what a 21st century school system should look like, and we can emulate this from other sectors. You know, my background is science. I studied physics. I would have never dreamt that there would be a Ministry of Science that tells me what to think and what to do and how to work. You know, that is my profession. I trust my profession more than I trust, you know, any institution. And I think that's something that we are still very far from education. Build space for good ideas, for innovation, and for collaboration. And when I talk about professional autonomy, I don't say, you know, teachers should be allowed to teach or to do what they like. It's about to do what is right in the current context, in the name of my profession, to have that knowledge and ownership.
Usted destaca 5 de los mejores sistemas de educación.
So you highlight 5 of the best education systems. We have not Spain here. And you highlight one of the principles of every system, of every model. Finland, education as a mean to reshape education. Estonia, education as an equity guarantee. Canada, equity to get excellent results of students coming from different social environments. Shanghai, excellent city, excellence education. Singapore, we've seen it before, education as the engine of economic growth. We can see the principles of economy and social environment. So, any question, brief question please about this. Anybody that wants to ask a question? Hello, good evening. Well, I'm Jesus. I'm the principal of Colegio Montserrat in Madrid. And, well, I have 2 children. one that is in primary school, and the other one is at secondary schools, more specifically in one of the education systems that has been mentioned, the speaker, and this is Canada. So I would like to ask about two elements that have appeared during this presentation that are really present in the area of education. One is the collaborative culture, another ones are data that are a little bit overwhelming, especially at school. So the question is, how could we take advantage of the power that collaboration has in order to act against data and to do it unanimously, where we can create milestones that could be shared?
I think, giving teachers better means to share their practice, to develop new ideas, to, countries in Asia are doing better than Europe on this. They have collaborative platforms where teachers, promote their ideas, develop their ideas. They combine them with reputational metrics, very modern, like in Facebook or Ebel. The more other teachers use your lessons, criticize your lessons, improve your lessons, the more you rise in status in this system, the more influential your role in this system. I think collaboration is very, very powerful in the way that like in most other ideas, in a time of exponentials in which we live, competing with computers is getting harder and harder if we try to do that individually. If we can connect our capacities, our brains, our ideas, we can raise our capacities in an exponential, not linear ways. And I think this is what good education systems are really achieving, that they get teachers out of their isolation in the classroom. They give their teachers so much more time. A teacher in Singapore here, you spend 100 hours every year working with colleagues on what they call professional learning communities. It's about observing different teachers' teaching practices, trying to analyze them, trying to improve them, design innovative practice, using technology. So you are the engineer of Singapore's future education as a teacher, but not alone. In the collaboration in your community, in the research university. So I think there is so much potential. I actually think there is no sector in our economies that hires so many talented people than the education system. You don't find any company that has 90% of its employees with a university degree. No company could afford it. But I don't think there's any sector in our societies that is using that talent so poorly. Just for the transmission of what we know, not for the generation of tomorrow's, pedagogies and technologies and good practices. But I think, there are great schools that do this, and I think that is what I think we should be looking to. There are always good examples.
Hablamos del profesor.
Well, we just talked about the teacher, of the 21st century teacher. So what do teachers need to contribute to a successful education system? We have some basic principles here, just to mention a couple of them: to participate in a collaborative culture, to train as competent professionals, to feel in the commitment and the responsibility, not only them but also able to promote it, to be the fosterers of tolerance and social cohesion. They are part of a society, to become transformation leaders. At the end of the day, the students depend on this transformation, to be able to face challenges coming from digitalization, technological revolution, to commit as ethical trainers, to be collaborative, to be professionally autonomous, to become innovators, to be passionate, to feel compassion, to be attentive, to pay attention to different needs, environments and languages, because they won't always move among the same type of students, or organizing continuous assessments to reinforce confidence, transparency, professional autonomy, and collaborative culture of the profession. This is something that is at the top level. So, questions about this that you want to ask, please be brief. Again, be brief, okay? Okay, good evening. I'm Javier. I'm I have a degree in physics. I teach mathematics, physics and chemistry, the compulsory secondary education. So we are speaking about teachers. You always say that you have a very important role in terms of empowering of the teacher, and I think that many of teachers try to develop all these aspects. So when when does a teacher become an excellent teacher, and who decides this excellence? The principals, the rest of the colleagues, social media, the awards, publications? Thank you.
You know, that's one of the most controversial, questions. Who judges? Who is the best judge on the quality of teaching? And I would argue, your peers. If you have a space where you have, classroom observation, lesson study in a school, professional learning community, that's a great place to judge. And I don't think it's a matter of judging teachers. It's a question of judging teaching. What are the best practices? Teachers you can't copy. But teaching, you can actually replicate. To identify what are the most innovative practices in the 21st century. How can we elevate teaching to teach 21st century competencies? And, the subject matter question is the easy part when it comes to behavior. Great teachers are not just, owning their subject. They also know their students. They actually know how each and every of their students learn. They know a lot about learning science. And these multiple facets are ones that I think in good professional learning communities, teachers learn to judge. And then, students can take a view on this. In fact, there's an interesting study in Norway. Students started to create groups where they actually judge their teachers on a digital platform. And of course, the teachers didn't like that really very much, not to be judged by their students. But actually, at a certain point, the teachers got together and said, well, it's happening. Why don't we work with the students to actually design a good system for students to express their views? And actually it became a very powerful tool for transformation of reflection. Sometimes you get really good feedback if it comes in a meaningful, positive, constructive, structured way. Principles can be, again, another mirror. Experts. But I really believe if the heart of looking at good teaching really comes from within the profession, and to create the space and opportunities for this is a hallmark of a really good education system. Japan, teachers spend hours and hours every week on lesson study, very systematic evaluation of good practice. Like what from Toyota, from the companies where the factory workers actually invent the practices. They do the same in the school. It's the people who work who know best, and they are actually called upon to improve their own work environment.
Bueno, como vemos hay principios.
Well, as we see, there are principles that are very much linked to the book and that lead us to think about the present and the future of education. What should we do now? Quality schools, starting from this book, one of the main principles, develop knowledge, competencies and character in a fast-moving time. Education as a key differentiator to enable that capacity to reinvent, to incorporate the educational values, to focus on what makes us human, to balance the design of the curriculum. The 21st century curricula should be characterized by rigor, something politicians should learn, orientation and coherence, a different type of student, someone that values the permanent learning, redesign assessment, align it with the curriculum and with the knowledge and with the skills and competences that our students need to prosper, promote innovation within the classroom and also out of the classroom, and to disseminate it in a more agile way, to look out and while we make progress, to apply what we learn, to turn a blind eye on the things that are happening right now in society, and to cultivate leadership, an efficient leadership in the system, to look at the changes related to technology and the environment and so on. As a question related to the leadership, any questions about this? Yeah, Francisco Martín from Territorio Emprendimiento. I'm a teacher, have been a teacher for 25 years in a system such as the Spanish one, where, I think that we all agree that there are professions that we do not know that are going to exist. How can we make brilliant students get out of the system, because someone has to teach them that, and they will have to come out of the system and run the risk of being left with nothing nothing in order to gain everything. Since everything is so regulated, they have to go along a path. How the brilliant students are going to get out of the way in order to learn those professions that do not exist yet?
I didn't really the translation. I didn't follow your question well. Repeat, please.
Sí, me refiero que estamos en un sistema totalmente...
What I mean is that we are in a rigid system. You go to high school, you go to university. How that person is going to be a creator of those professions that do not exist in robotics and so on? How are they going to run the risk of not going to university and being taught something? And they are going to run the risk if they want to learn on themselves. That is one of the reasons why we do not have. There is no system such as the 42 in Paris, which have a different system.
I accept the problem. I think our systems, and that's not just in Spain, our systems are rigid, our systems are constraining. But I also do believe they give us more space than what we often use. In a classroom, actually, you can pursue innovative practice. As a school leader, you actually, despite all the regulation, you have more freedom than you often use in a school, and I think that's the starting point. Using the discretion that we have, being courageous. The problem is not conservative followers in education. The problem is conservative leaders. Leaders who are basically constraining their environments more than they really need to. The education systems, as they stand, actually provide quite a bit of space for innovative pedagogies, innovative kind of practices, and allowing students. But overall, I very much take your point. That's also my greatest concern, that actually children, when they enter school, they're very creative, they're very innovative, they are very curious, they're very courageous. They have all those qualities that we want to develop, and then step by step we take it away from them because we penalize them for being different, we penalize them for innovative thinking. And we should, in the long run, really rethink our practices to ensure that we encourage students to pursue divergent thinking, to question our wisdom, and the same for teachers, to, in a very systematic way, explore innovative practices and be at the frontier of research and learning science and promote that work. And I believe if we do not achieve this, our education systems are actually going to hold us back rather than move us forward. And I have the same commentary about our gateways in education, the exam systems, the assessments that we use. They could become very powerful tools to show us, what is important in education, what is valued. They could encourage innovative practice. But if we, use, simple multiple choice tests to test whether students know certain things or not, we're going to reward the wrong kind of learning, the wrong kind of teaching, and the wrong system designs. I think that all is really, really important in the 21st century to rethink those practices. What makes me optimistic? That I see lots of really good examples all around the world. I think I have the most privileged job in the world. I've been in classrooms in over 60 countries, and I've seen so many really good ideas, motivated people, committed people who want to change things, that I think if we provide, the right environment, we can do that.
Primera clase, ¿cómo
So, how to build the best school for the 21st century. I would like you to conclude with an optimistic message. We want to be positive and optimistic. Just one single idea to be better in education in Spain by 2020, for example. Can you give us an idea, an optimistic idea, a positive one?
Build trust in teachers, in students, in learners, in institutions, and give, the people the benefit of, owning their profession. I think you don't need a new law for this. You don't need a new curriculum necessarily for this. I think this is something where everybody can make a big contribution. Parents can make a contribution to this by, working with the teachers, working with the school, supporting their children in school. Teachers can make an enormous contribution by this, by spending more time with their colleagues to question, to establish this. School leaders, I think, can play a big role in this. I do believe, I think the system can be always a problem, but I think the people in the system are the solution. And I think this is something where, think about the progress that Spain has achieved in the last 50 years in education. Where Spanish education was 50 years ago, where it is now. But, the world is developing and accelerating space. And I think at the moment we have to say that the gap between what society demands from schools and what schools provide is becoming wider. So we have to redouble our efforts in this as well. But Spain, in a way you can say, actually invests a lot in education. Spending on education, Spain has a commitment to education. And I also this morning I discussed with people, I'm very impressed, even in the media, how much education is a topic. People take this serious. They know that is the future. The schools today are going to be Spain's economy and society in some years' time. And I think that is a very, very important capital, the kind of belief that education is going to change lives and drive our societies.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. First class, Andreas Schleicher. I would also like to thank those in attendance and the Santillana Foundation and the Telefónica Foundation for giving us the venue to discuss this today and tomorrow, education and teaching. Let's hope that we all become better. Thank you very much and have a nice night.